I'm sitting in my kitchen holding the papers that have changed everything, the official documents for the house my son Jamal bought using my life savings, and my hands are shaking, not from anger but from a sadness so heavy it feels hard to breathe. I've just learned something I never thought I would have to face. My bedroom door is slightly open and I can clearly hear Jamal talking on the phone with his wife, Kesha, his voice full of excitement as he talks about their future, not ours, only theirs. He laughs and says everything is done, that the papers arrived and the house is finally theirs, and that same laugh, the one that used to make me so happy when he was a child, now feels distant and unfamiliar. Then he says his mother-in-law, Miss Cynthia, will be so happy to live with them and finally have her own room with a view of the garden, just like she always wanted. In that moment my heart sinks because I realize she is the one who will live in the house I paid for, the house where I believed I would have my own place, my own space and my own family life. And suddenly I understand that I was never part of their real plan at all. And me, Jamal? I whisper to myself, knowing he can't hear me as I keep listening from the other room. He tells Kesha that they already talked about it, that I'm fine in my apartment and that I always complain too much, so this way will be calmer for everyone. Him, the kids and her mother, calling them a real family. Those words hit my heart like a deep, freezing ache. After everything I gave, my life savings, my mother's jewelry and my own financial security so he could have that house, I'm not part of their real family. I close my eyes and memories rush back. Just 6 months ago, Jamal sat at this same kitchen table with that familiar sad look he always has when he wants something, and told me about his dream house with 3 bedrooms, a yard for the kids and a good neighborhood. He said he only needed $20,000 for the down payment and promised to pay me back in 2 years. And he repeated again and again that I would always have a place with them. I believed him because he was my son and because a mother wants to trust, even when her heart should be more careful. Those were his exact words and I remember them because I wrote them down that very night in my journal. I had been so excited I couldn't sleep. Finally, after years of feeling like a visitor in my own son's life, I thought I would have a place. A home where I could grow old, surrounded by the laughter of my grandchildren, family dinners and warm holiday celebrations. Then Kesha's voice cut through the phone like a knife. "What plans, baby?" "The plans," she said. "That your mom isn't moving in with us? That the house is just for the 3 of us adults and the kids. You know, my mom needs her peace. And we already talked about how your mom can be hard to live with." Hard to live with. Me, who had lived 69 years quietly, raising this boy alone after his father left, working double shifts to pay for his college, never asking for anything in return. Hard to live with? Jamal hesitated. "No, I haven't told her yet. I thought we could talk after the move. You know how she gets when things change." They were speaking about me as if I were a difficult child, not the woman who had given them the very opportunity to have this house, who had sacrificed everything so they could live comfortably. I slowly stand up from my chair and walk over to the window, doing it quietly so no one hears me. Outside, the rain is falling and the drops sliding down the glass look just like tears, but I refuse to let myself cry. 25 years in that dull office job, 25 years of saving every dollar, skipping small treats, buying clothes only on sale and bringing my lunch from home. Everything I did was to build some security for my son and to make sure I wouldn't become a burden in my old age. And now, after all that, I still turn out to be a burden anyway. I hear Kesha's voice again, calm and practical, saying they should figure out how to tell me and maybe suggest I find a smaller, cheaper apartment that fits my needs. As if they were talking about something simple like dinner plans. Something more affordable. Now that they have my $20,000, now that they've gotten what they wanted, it's time for me to move somewhere cheaper. As if my real needs don't include love and being close to my only family. The call ends and I hear Jamal walking toward the kitchen, so I quickly sit back down and pretend to study the electric bill, acting like I heard nothing at all, like my whole world hadn't just fallen apart in the last 10 minutes. "Hey mama," he says. "How are you doing?" he asks, his voice warm and normal as if he hadn't just finished planning a future that leaves me out of the life I helped pay for. "I'm fine, son," I reply, keeping my voice steady. "Are the house papers all settled?" He smiles and says everything is perfect, that they'll be moving in soon and starting a new chapter. A new chapter for him, for Kesha, for her mother and for the kids. A chapter where I don't seem to exist. "That's good," I tell him calmly. "I'm happy for you." He leans in and kisses my forehead like he always does, a gesture that once meant everything to me but now feels empty and painful. "Thanks for everything, Mama. You know we couldn't have done this without you," he says, and I can't help thinking how true that is, without me but also without me in their future. When he leaves, I'm alone again, holding the papers that prove my son now owns a house worth $150,000, with $20,000 of it coming from my life savings, a house where his mother-in-law will get the garden view room I once dreamed about for myself. I fold the documents carefully and place them in the kitchen drawer with my bills and prescriptions, and it feels like I'm also putting away what little dignity I have left. But something is shifting inside me, something cold, clear, and steady like the rain sliding down the window. For the first time in years, I don't feel like crying. I feel like acting. That night, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, thinking about all the signs I ignored. How Jamal and Kesha treated me as if I were invisible, and I excused it, telling myself they were just busy with their own lives. How they borrowed money and never repaid a single dollar, and I called it helping family. I get up at 5 the next morning as usual, but this time it isn't out of habit. It's because I have important things to do. I make my coffee in silence and sit at the kitchen table with my old notebook. Normally, I use it to track monthly expenses, but today it will serve a different purpose. I start listing every bit of money I've given Jamal over the past 5 years. Every loan, every small act of help, every emergency he never paid back. The list grows quickly. $2,000 for a used car, $800 to fix the transmission, $10,000 for the kids' school uniforms and supplies. And it keeps going, a clear record of how much I've quietly carried for them while they treated me like I didn't matter. I keep adding to the list. $700 for Kesha's dentist, $3,000 to clear their credit card balance, $500 here, $300 there, and now $20,000 for the house. And when I see the total, my head starts to spin. $48,300 in just 5 years, nearly $48,000 I saved since I was 18 by skipping trips, choosing the cheapest food, and using the same purse for years. All that effort, all that sacrifice, and for what? 4 polite Sunday visits where I sit quietly while they talk about their own lives. For grandchildren who barely know me because I'm not fun. For being left out of birthdays, graduations, and family dinners because they say they don't want to bother me or think I don't like going out. I close the notebook with a heavy heart and walk to my bedroom, then open the closet and take down the old shoebox where I keep my most important papers. Birth records, my will, insurance, bank papers, everything that proves who I am and what I've built. I wrote that will 3 years ago when I turned 66, and in it Jamal was supposed to receive everything because back then I still believed that family always meant loyalty and care. My home, my savings, my insurance, and even the jewelry my grandmother left me, all of it was meant for him because he is my only son in the center of my world, or at least that's what I used to believe. Looking back, I realize how innocent the first was. That morning around 7 my phone rang and it was Jamal, calling in his usual warm voice, asking how I was. I answered calmly, even though inside I felt strangely distant, and then he got to the real reason for calling. He explained that he and Kesha had been talking and needed a little more help because moving always costs more than expected. I already knew what was coming because it always came back to money. When I asked how much, he said $3,000 for movers, some furniture, and paint to fix up the house before they move in next week. Next week. He was moving next week and hadn't even told me, hadn't even invited me to see the house I helped pay for. Trying to stay calm, I asked him when I would get to see it, and suddenly the line went quiet for so long that I honestly thought the call had ended. That he cleared his throat and said the house still needed a little work and that they would take me to see it once everything was finished, adding that I wouldn't want to see it in a messy state anyway. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in my heart, when I would be moving in with them, and this time the silence on the line felt even heavier. Finally, he said that he and Kesha had talked and thought it might be better if I stayed in my apartment for a while until they settled in, because the kids were nervous about the change and Kesha was stressed with her new job, which he casually mentioned paid her almost $2,000 a month. I was stunned because even with that new income, they were still asking me for $3,000, money I would have to take from the small savings I live on along with my $700 pension. I told him I needed time to think about it, and he sounded surprised, saying I had never hesitated before when he asked for help. I wanted to tell him the truth, that nothing had really been fine for a long time and I had just refused to see it, but instead I swallowed my feelings and quietly said that everything was okay, even though my heart knew it wasn't. I just need to check my accounts. I'll call you in a few days, I said firmly. In a few days. But Mama, we need the money by tomorrow. The movers want a 50% deposit. I didn't wait for him to protest and hung up. My hands were shaking, but not from fear. This was something different. Focus and determination. I went over to my old computer, the one Jamal had set up for me 2 years ago so I wouldn't feel so alone, and turned it on, waiting for it to load. I'm not great with technology, but I know enough to log into my online bank account. There was my savings. After giving him the $20,000 for the house, I had just $2,300 left. Barely enough to cover essentials, just a little buffer between me and being completely dependent on a son who already planned to push me out once he settled into his new home. I picked up the phone and called the bank. "Good morning, National Bank, how can I help you?" "Good morning," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I need to speak with someone about my savings account. I want to make some important changes to my account," I said, my voice steady. "Certainly, ma'am. Could you provide your account number and full name?" As I gave them my information, a feeling I hadn't experienced in years washed over me. Control. For the first time in a long while, I was in charge of my money, my life, my future. "How can we help you today, Miss Jones?" the banker asked. "I want to remove my son as an authorized user on my account, and I also want to cancel the extra debit card in his name." "I understand. Is there a reason for this?" "Yes," I said firmly. "I've realized that every dollar I've given them has been funding my own exclusion. I've been paying for my own loneliness while they build a life that leaves me out." "Understood. I'll process these changes right away. Anything else?" "Yes," I said, my heart steady. "I want to explore my options for updating my will." The banker explained that the bank works with estate law attorneys and could send information, and I felt a sense of clarity settle over me. Finally, for the first time in decades, I was taking charge of my life and my choices. That I told the bank to send the information to my home address, and when I ended the call, I felt lighter, as if I had just taken the first real step toward a new chapter, even if I didn't yet know exactly where it would lead. A moment later, my phone rang again, and of course it was Jamal. He said we must have gotten cut off, but I calmly reminded him that I had already said I would call him in a few days. He quickly returned to the same question, asking if I was going to give him the $3,000 because the movers were pressuring him, and for the first time I asked him something different: whether he had ever stopped to think if I might need help too. He sounded confused and worried and even offered to come over, but I told him I just needed time to think and sort things out. He repeated that it was only $3,000 and said I had always helped him, which was true, but in that moment I realized how long it had been since anyone had truly helped me. I told him I would call when I had made my decision, and when he said I was acting strange, I understood something clearly for the first time in years. I wasn't acting strange at all. I was finally seeing the situation for what it really was. For the first time in my life, I felt a strange mix of sadness and clear thinking, and that feeling gave me the strength to finally do what I should have done years ago. I wished my son a good day, ended the call, and this time I turned my phone completely off. I sat quietly in my apartment, and instead of feeling lonely, I felt calm, as if the silence was giving me room to breathe and think. I looked at my hands that had worked for nearly 70 years and had given so much, and I made a promise to myself that I would not give another dollar unless I was treated with real respect. For the next 3 days the phone kept ringing. First Jamal, then Kesha, and even the children. But I didn't answer because I needed time to understand my own situation and plan my next step. When I finally turned the phone on Wednesday morning, I saw dozens of missed calls and messages, and as I read them one by one, they only confirmed that I was doing the right thing, because every message was about money and pressure, not about me or how I was feeling. Jamal kept sending messages nonstop. 2:45 p.m. Tuesday. "If you don't call me today, I'm coming over to your apartment." 8:20 p.m. Tuesday. "Grandma, Dad says you're sick. Are you okay?" My 8-year-old grandson, DeAndre, asking about me because his father had told him I was unwell. While for Jamal, the only reason I wasn't immediately giving him money must be that I was sick. But the message that cut the deepest and also gave me the clearest perspective came early this morning. "Mama, if this is about the house, we can talk. Maybe we can find a solution for you to have your space too. But I need you to help me with the move first. Then we'll fix the other stuff." That other stuff was me. My place in their lives, my right to the house I helped pay for, my dignity as a mother and as a person. All of that would only be fixed once they got what they wanted. I got dressed deliberately, brushed my hair, and put on a little makeup. Today was my day, and I had important appointments to keep. The first stop was the bank at 10 a.m. I walked the 6 blocks, breathing in the fresh air, and realized how much I had missed simply walking without rushing, without worrying about anyone else's needs. Just thinking about my own plans for the first time in years. At the bank, Miss Anderson, the same professional woman who had helped me over the phone, greeted me warmly. She was elegant, confident, and seemed to understand the weight of what I was doing. "Good morning, Miss Jones. How are you feeling after the recent changes to your account?" she asked. "I feel great, thank you," I replied, my voice steady. "I came today because I want to make a few more adjustments." "Of course. What would you like to do?" she asked. I explained that I wanted to open a completely separate savings account and transfer $10,000 from my main account into it. "Any particular reason for this?" she inquired. "Let's just say I want to have more control over my finances," I said. Miss Anderson nodded knowingly, probably familiar with situations where family members take advantage of someone's generosity. "An excellent decision, Miss Jones," she said. "This new account will have its own debit card, and we can even send statements to a different address if you'd like." "Yes, please," I said, feeling a sense of relief. "Send them to a post office box. I want complete privacy and control over my money." "Of course," Miss Anderson added, "you might also consider putting a portion of these funds into a certificate of deposit. The interest is better and it keeps your money even more secure." I left the bank feeling lighter than I had in years. $10,000 now sat in an account only I knew about. Funds Jamal could never touch or demand. For the first time, I felt a real sense of financial independence and security for my future. My next stop was at noon, the office of the lawyer recommended by the bank. Attorney Michael Carter welcomed me into his small but tidy office with calm patience, understanding that legal matters can feel overwhelming, especially for someone my age. "Ms. Jones, I understand you want to review your will?" he asked. "Yes, I want to make some serious changes," I replied, speaking clearly and without emotion. I laid out the facts. The $48,000 I had given Jamal over the years, the house I helped him buy, and his plan to exclude me from his life once he had everything. Attorney Carter listened carefully, taking notes without interrupting. "Ms. Jones," he said finally, "unfortunately your situation is not uncommon. I see cases like this often and there are ways to protect your interests. What specific changes would you like to make to your will?" Attorney Carter asked. "I want to divide my inheritance differently," I explained. "Part of it can go to Jamal, but I also want to give some to charities, especially those that support older women in vulnerable situations." "Do you have any organizations in mind?" he asked. "Not yet," I admitted. "Could you help me look into some options?" "Absolutely," he replied. "I also suggest considering conditions for your son's inheritance." "Conditions?" I asked. "For example, he could receive his portion only if he meets certain commitments while you're alive. Visiting regularly, including you in family decisions and helping with medical care." I felt a twinge of sadness. Is this really how family has to be handled, through contracts to force respect and care? "It's worth thinking about," he said kindly. "In the meantime, I'll draft some basic changes and we can meet next week to review them." By the time I left his office, it was 2 p.m. and I felt hungry. But instead of heading home to my usual quick sandwich, I chose something different. I stepped into a small diner, sat at a window table, and for the first time in years, allowed myself to relax and enjoy a quiet moment for me. I hadn't eaten alone in a restaurant for years. Usually, whenever I went out, it was with Jamal and his family, and I was the one picking up the bill. Today, I treat myself exactly to what I want: pan-seared salmon with vegetables and a glass of white wine. The total comes to $35, money that used to feel like a luxury or even wasteful, but now feels like an investment in my own joy. I eat slowly, watching the world outside the window. Young couples holding hands, parents with strollers, older people walking steadily with canes, everyone living their everyday lives. And I realize that I can have a life like that too, one where my choices aren't dictated by the endless demands of others. My phone buzzes. A message from Jamal. "Mama, I can't take it anymore. I'm coming to your apartment at 4 o'clock. We need to talk." Glancing at the clock, it's 3:15. I have 45 minutes to get home and get ready for a difficult conversation, but for the first time in years I'm not scared. Instead, I feel calm, even curious. I pay the bill, leave a generous tip, and step out, ready to face whatever comes next. The sun is out, and for the first time in a very long while, I feel like that light is meant for me too. As I walk back to my apartment, I quietly plan what I'm going to say to Jamal, and I promise myself I won't shout, accuse, or create any drama. I won't bring up old mistakes or try to make him feel guilty, because that won't change anything. Instead, I will calmly tell him the truth, that I've made clear decisions about my life and my money, and those choices are not open for discussion anymore. I reach home at 3:50, giving myself 10 quiet minutes to steady my thoughts and my heart. I sit in my favorite chair by the window and wait, not feeling nervous but feeling ready and sure of myself. Right at 4 o'clock, I hear strong, impatient knocks on the door, the kind from someone who expects everything to be done for them right away. I stand up slowly, fix my skirt and walk to the door, taking a deep breath and reminding myself that this is my home, my money and my life. When I open the door, Jamal is there, but this time he isn't alone. Kesha is standing just behind him, and from her face I already know this won't be a simple visit. She has that familiar look, the one she uses when she wants something but pretends she's only concerned about me, and the two of them stare at me like I'm a confused child they've finally come to rescue. Jamal says, "Mama, thank God you're okay, we were so worried," and tries to hug me, but his arms feel stiff and unsure, not warm like they used to. He asks why I didn't answer the phone and says I scared them, and I calmly greet Kesha, who only gives a short nod. I tell him clearly that I'm not a child and that in the last 3 days they caused me more pain than I ever caused them, and he looks shocked and says we're family and should talk things through. I answer that they did talk, just not with me, and I explain that they discussed how I'm hard to live with, how I should move to a cheaper place, and how they plan their future while using my money for what they call their real family. I tell him they spoke about me like I was a problem to solve, not a mother with feelings. Jamal's face loses its color and he looks at Kesha, who suddenly seems uncomfortable, and he starts to deny it, but I stop him and ask what they were really doing if not using me and then pushing me aside. I remind him of the $20,000 for the house and the $48,300 I've given him over the past 5 years. And I add that this isn't confusion or imagination, it's the truth I finally chose to face. He looked at me like he couldn't believe what he was hearing, and I asked him if he really thought my love was an endless source he could use without ever giving anything back, as if caring for him was some kind of free service. He started apologizing, saying he and Kesha had talked and changed their minds, promising they now wanted me to live with them and that they would make it work. But I told him in a steady voice that this wasn't true. I explained that they only wanted me around because they were scared of losing what I provided, not because they truly wanted me in their lives, and that they had already lost me the moment they decided I wasn't part of their real family. He broke down in tears and Kesha tried to calm him, but I didn't take my words back and told them something else very clearly. I was no longer their personal bank and I would not be there to solve their money problems anymore. I said the $3,000 for the move was their problem to figure out, because they would not receive another dollar from me now or in the future. Jamal stared at me in complete disbelief, finally realizing that my support had limits and that he had taken it for granted for far too long. With my heart pounding but my mind made up, I told them it was time to leave because from that moment on things were going to be different. Jamal begged me to keep talking, but I told him calmly that we had talked for almost 70 years and that I was finally done repeating the same conversations, and after a short, heavy silence, he and Kesha turned around and left. I closed the door, leaned against it for a moment and felt my legs shake, not from fear but from the weight of everything I had just carried and finally put down, and even though I was tired, I also felt more awake than I had in years. I sat in my chair and realized how long I had lived only for others, giving and giving, excusing their behavior and even blaming myself for allowing it. And then I understood that forgiving someone does not mean pretending nothing happened, because trust is rebuilt through actions, not promises. I stood by the window for a long time, knowing I didn't have answers about whether Jamal would truly change or whether our relationship would ever become what I once dreamed, but I was sure of one thing. I was no longer scared to be by myself, no longer scared to say no, and no longer scared to protect my own dignity. I called my friend Leonita, told her my day had been different and heavy but somehow hopeful, and when she invited me to go to the park and sit under our favorite tree, I gladly agreed. As I got ready to leave, I looked in the mirror and saw a 69-year-old woman who finally understood that her value is not measured by how much she gives, but by how she respects herself, and for the first time in a very long while, I walked out the door with a quiet, genuine smile.